Welcome to the podcast. Let's dive straight into the idea of whether the future might really belong to China.
Absolutely, it's a fascinating question, especially when we consider how quickly China's building up its empire, right?
Exactly. And, at around 108 in this discussion, there's a notion of a life full of ease and beauty, which really sets the tone for what might be a very different societal model than what we're
Yeah,
used to.
that caught my attention too. The idea of reimagining lifestyle down to daily aesthetics is pretty bold. So, how does that tie into, say, the overall strategy?
It's linked to the notion of rule by engineers, discussed around Edo 516, where decision making and infrastructure are driven by technical expertise and rapid implementation, which many argue is giving them a significant edge.
I'm curious though, how does that approach compare with the Western models, where innovation sometimes feels a tad slower?
Great point. It's like a deliberate, even aggressive pursuit of technological mastery, which is highlighted around the 1034 mark. China's investing massively in tech and infrastructure, and that's reshaping global power dynamics.
Yep. And that then leads us to the question around 1536. Is autocracy actually helping drive this innovation? It's a question that really divides scholars.
Exactly. There's this paradox where the same autocratic system that limits personal freedoms is, in a way, streamlining decision making. It can be super effective when the state takes a top down approach to invest in breakthrough industries.
Yep, I get that, but don't you think there's a risk? I mean, centralizing so much power might lead to vulnerabilities if mismanaged, right?
True, and that's where the segment at 3514 on how could China fail really comes in. Even with all this momentum, there are inherent risks in a system that lacks the checks and balances we see elsewhere.
I can see that. It reminds me a bit of building on a shaky foundation. The rapid pace may hide some structural weaknesses.
Absolutely. And consider what happens at 2444 when they talk about the real stakes of the global competition. The race isn't just about, speed. It's about redefining power on every front: economic, military, technological.
Right. Can you imagine then that the US might be, in some ways, facing an opponent that's not playing under the same rules we are?
You're spot on. At one level, it's almost like they're engineering an entirely new future where efficiency trumps debate and adaptation is, exponentially faster.
Yeah. Yet, I've heard some say that America's potential shouldn't be underestimated either. What does the conversation say about America's role here?
Right. And that's where around the 5129 mark, there's some genuine advice for America. It suggests that instead of just being in reaction mode, the US could pivot to its own strengths, like innovation ecosystems rooted in democratic accountability.
It sounds like there's an urgent need to re-strategize, sort of a wake-up call for policymakers, right?
Precisely. It's like a challenge being thrown down. Build a future where freedom and innovation bolster one another rather than being at
Right.
odds.
And then there's the crux of the matter. Is this rapid development something that will inevitably overtake the US, or can America reinvent itself?
That's the million-dollar question. The discussion frames this as a high-stakes game where America's traditional model might get, well, outpaced if it doesn't embrace some of the dynamism that characterizes China's approach.
Yeah. But honestly, isn't there a danger in idealizing speed and engineering prowess too much? Innovation in Western contexts has flourished on diversity of thought and, a bit of bureaucratic lag sometimes works as a filter for truly valuable ideas.
That's a valid critique. I do see the point that a mix of rapid action and careful, slow innovation often produces sustainable results. However, the discussion implies that if the US doesn't capture that momentum, it could be left trailing, no matter how refined its processes are.
It's almost like comparing a sprint to a marathon. You trade off speed for endurance, right?
Exactly. And if you're sprinting without a plan, you might win the race but crash soon after. That's why the future is seen as a balancing act between immediate gains and long-term stability.
Right. So, if you had to sum it up, is the future being engineered in a way that might ultimately redefine global power structures?
Absolutely. With China pushing forward with a technological mastery that goes beyond just economic investment, it's essentially testing a new blueprint for national power. The stakes are enormous, not only for who leads in tech, but for the very nature of governance and societal organization.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how quickly public perception can shift when you see something like rule by engineers shaping policy discussions?
Right, it's like a paradigm shift. Where traditionally democracy dominated our narratives, now there's this debate over whether, perhaps, a technocratic approach could yield faster, more efficient outcomes.
Do you think, though, that there's a risk in overvaluing technocracy? I mean, society isn't just numbers and speed, it's also about human values and freedoms.
Absolutely, and that's the inherent conflict here. It's a double edged sword. On one side, you have the allure of engineering a utopia, and on the other, the danger of sacrificing crucial aspects of human dignity in the process.
Right. It definitely seems like the conversation invites us to balance these competing priorities: innovation versus tradition, speed versus oversight.
Exactly. And that's also what makes this discussion so compelling. The stakes aren't confined to just market share or tech leadership, they extend to how we envision society itself.
As we look forward, what do you think are some realistic scenarios for both the US and China?
I think one scenario is that China continues to accelerate its development through centralized decision making and massive investments in AI, space, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, the US must leverage its strengths in creativity, diverse thought, and robust institutions to mount a counterbalance.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like a race where each side has a totally different playbook, and the winner might very well be determined by who adapts quicker to global changes.
Precisely. And at around 5129, the advice for America was quite pointed. It urges a return to strategic innovation, one that doesn't shy away from tough systemic reforms, but capitalizes on inherent freedoms to foster breakthrough ideas.
Right. I do wonder if the US political landscape, given its current divisions, might struggle to implement such sweeping changes.
That's a fair concern. It's like trying to coordinate a massive team where every player wants a different strategy. If the US can unify around a common vision, there's hope. Otherwise, it may very well end up playing catch up.
In the end, it appears the future is still up in the air. A dynamic contest between different visions of progress and governance, each with their own risks and rewards.
Absolutely. The conversation invites us to think deeply about what progress really means and how technology and governance will shape our global narrative going forward.
Yep, it's been an enlightening discussion, one that certainly leaves us with a lot to ponder about the balance between innovation and ideological commitment.
Right, and as we wrap up, it's clear that whether the future belongs to China or the West, or perhaps somewhere in between, every player must evolve, adapt, and maybe even redefine what leadership looks like.
Absolutely.